Hello and welcome to Arteach podcasts. Today I'm here with ceramic artist Julie Miles. Hello Julie.
Hi.
How are you today?
Yeah, I'm okay, thank you.
So tell us a little bit about Arteach.
Okay, Arteach is a collection of professional artists who came together to help promote each other as artists in schools. We go into schools as artists in residence alongside our professional practice. So we show children in schools that you can be an artist. It is a kind of legitimate career, and we help deliver the curriculum more creatively, working alongside teachers, and also kind of having a product at the end. It all depends.
Just recently you've been given an Arts Council grant for the project The King of the Cats. Tell us a little bit about that.
The King of the Cats was an idea originated with Mayam Wowder, whose work is based on nursery rhymes. Her idea was to develop a project alongside a storyteller based on old Lancashire Tales. So we have a book of folk tales published in 1953 called Old Folk Tales of Lancashire, written by Frederick Grice, which is a collection of tales across Lancashire from Manchester up towards the Cumbrian borders or the Westmorland borders. And we have been reading the books and working alongside the storyteller Jackie Harris, who is retelling the tales. And we've been creating work inspired by the stories that have been retold.
Tell us about your background as an artist.
I've always wanted to be an artist, and not necessarily a ceramic artist. I wanted to actually be an embroiderer. And I went to Cumbria College of Art and Design to do a mixed degree in ceramics, embroidery and screen print. And I was kind of enticed by what clay can do. So I was making embroideries and large-scale textile pieces incorporating clay until my final year, when my whole final project was actually created in clay, which maybe harks back to my family's history, as my parents are from Newcastle-under-Lyme, bordering on through potteries, and all my grandparents and my aunties and uncles have all worked in pot banks, so maybe it's in the blood.
So your whole family have been involved in pottery?
Yeah, so it is kind of part of my history.
And so you moved to Lancashire when you were a teenager. So did you hear these stories and tales growing up?
We had similar stories and tales growing up about witches and things like that. But moving to Lancashire towards Pendle Hill, the emphasis was far more on the kind of Lancashire witches and boggarts. We never had boggarts in our stories. We can have imps and elves and things like that. But boggarts are fascinating things, and they're not the things that J.K. Rowling created, which are shapeshifters. Boggarts are kind of imps and naughty fairies, and they're far more kind of evil than the shapeshifters that she's created. So kind of there are fascinations in that. I kind of worked around an old brick factory, and they had coke kilns, which the locals called fairy caverns. So it kind of, my work has interweaved with folk tales and things like that for a while now. Fairy caverns are kind of really beautiful old brick kilns, so kind of dome shaped, which was one of my first brick pieces that I made in Burnley, which is an imitation coke kiln. So these fairy caverns is kind of interwoven in some of the work.
So can you tell us a little bit about your process and how you work as an artist?
I find drawing really, really important, and I have a number of sketchbooks while working on the project. We were talking about putting some of the sketchbooks in the exhibition, or maybe the travelling suitcase, to show people how we work out our ideas. I've reread the stories many, many times, not just to myself, but I've also read them out loud to other people, which I think helps with the thinking process. And then I kind of sit with my sketchbook or a drawing board and paper, and I try and kind of pull out some of the characters in there. My work is landscape based, and I started working with animals and creating animal sculpture. So quite a lot of the characters in the stories have kind of enticed me in, and I've created the King of the Cats, building the King of the Cats, and I've taken some of the animals in the stories. I work with clay, but then I go back to my sketchbooks and I do some doodles and sketches, and then I go back to the clay. So the things I make in clay do not represent the sketches and drawings as much, because it's all a process, it's all a learning process, and how you kind of develop the ideas and the characters. So the final pieces may not tally with the sketchbooks, but it's my working ideas, it's my workings out.
So would you say that the landscapes inspired you?
All my work is about landscape and nature. Ever since I started creating, I hark back to old nature tables and collecting things. My pockets are full of stones, my pockets are full of seed heads, conkers, leaves, anything, feathers and things like that. And it's always about the details and landscape, and sometimes it's about the sense of place, because a feather might represent a walk that I did or a place that I visited, and it's about memories as well. It might represent a bird that I saw on the walk, or a red kite that you kind of see in certain areas of Scotland and places like that. So elements in nature inspire me alongside the animals and the creatures and things. So quite a lot of the stories do have very kind of fabulous descriptions of things in the landscape and the moors and the heathers and things like that, and quite a lot of them it tells you about the green shanks and the curlews, and it sets the scene for the stories. So they kind of drew me in quite a lot. I will be making a landscape piece alongside the characters, which is going to be an installation piece, but I'll tell you more about that as it develops.
So can you tell us about your favourite stories?
My favourite story is Lady Sybil and the Milk White Doe. The descriptions in the story are really kind of enchanting. The way that the storyteller has described the scenes, the settings, and reading it has a happy ending, and I quite like that, whereas some of them haven't got a happy ending, and some of them are a bit bleak, and I quite like that one. I think that's it's very romantic.
And you've created a piece for that, haven't you?
I have, yes. I've created a slight piece based on the Milk White Doe.
So why do you think it's important to retell these stories?
It's important to retell stories because it's part of people's history, it's part of people's identity, it's part of the area's identity. Lancashire is quite unique to having boggarts. You'll only find boggarts in Lancashire. And if we don't retell them, if we don't capture them in some way, we'll lose them with the last generation kind of thing. I know we all have versions of stories, and we all quite like stories. We all had bedtime top stories when we were a child, and it harks back to childhood, but also it gives a place an identity. Lancashire has a unique one in stories, I feel, and they're quite enchanting.
And do you think that everybody in Lancashire knows these stories? Do you think it's well known, or do you think that is something that is going to help with this exhibition, is to kind of within the school work that you're doing?
Not all of them are well known. Quite a lot of them have witches in them, and I think some of the stories have entwined into local legend and local folklore, or the lady down the road, keep away from her, she has cats and she's a witch kind of thing. I think all childhood and all stories have elements of that, don't they? We're working with schools, so each area will have a workshop. A lot of the artist is linked to a school, and they'll have an artist residency. I'm working in a school in Penwithen, in Preston. There are a couple of stories, not from this book, but in other areas that could link, and it's a good way of collecting them and keeping them going and getting the children maybe to create their own as well, alongside the artwork and alongside a visit to the gallery and all the museum space to work with the artists. It's about getting families and children into galleries and museums and using them as a fantastic resource, because they are there, they are free, and the stories will probably intertwine with some of the things in there. Quite a lot of the museums around here have witches' bottles, which links to a load of stories, and I didn't know what a witch bottle was until I started reading the stories, and it's to ward off witches. So you have a bottle with hair and pins and you're in, and you have it kind of embedded into your wall or your doorpost to stop witches come over the threshold. And it's to ward away witches, and it kind of links into quite a lot of the stories, because quite a lot of the stories have the witches that they're fearful of, but they still go to them to cure the ills of the cattle or the animals, or cure the ills of the family. It's fascinating to link to history, fascinating to link to museums. There's a whole kind of wealth of things that can be worked through in schools, literacy, history, geography. It hits so many kind of subject matters across the curriculum.
Tell us about the Kin of the Cats book.
Working with the storyteller, how do we get across her work as well? We could have it on a blog, we could have it on our website and things like that. To have a collection of the stories retold alongside our work, the pieces will be illustrated. The stories in the book, it will live on, and people can use it as a resource and read it as bedtime stories and things like that. So it's a lovely kind of piece in itself, but it works alongside the exhibition.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you'd like to know more about the King of the Cats exhibition and the organisation Arteach, please go to www.thekingofthecats.wordpress.com. Thank you for listening.